Welcome everyone to today's tech tip. So today I want to go over some basic concepts of JavaScript function arguments in this tech tip. And to do that, I've got a function here called sum, and what that does is simply return the sum of argument A and argument B. And the first thing I want to show you guys is that in fact it's possible in JavaScript to call a function without actually passing all the parameters there. So in this case, what's happening is I'm calling the sum function, just passing the first argument, and it's returning not a number. But if I log b here, well, actually what I'm going to get is undefined. So that means that if you call a JavaScript function and you don't specify all the arguments, JavaScript's just going to go ahead and say, okay, we're going to run the function, and all the arguments that weren't specified in the call here are just going to be undefined. And so another thing that we can do in JavaScript is say that we can use a default value for any argument. So let's say that we want to give it b a default value of 8. Well, then actually here my code sum5 is just going to return 13. Because b now has a default value of 8, and all I have to do that is just say in the function signature that b has equals 8. Of course, I can still override that value, so if I pass 10 here for b, I'm going to get 15 as my sum. But if I don't specify that, then it's going to use 8, and I can even give a default value of, let's say, 3, and then if I remove this one, all the arguments here in my sum call, then it's just going to use all the default values and return 3 plus 8, which equals 11. So now I've shown you how you can actually remove arguments when you're calling a function by specifying default arguments. But what I also want to do is see how I can just add a bunch of arguments here, like 4, 2, 1, 5, 6. And maybe I want to extend my sum function so that it can take as many arguments as I want. So I can sum all the different numbers and I don't have to worry about how many arguments I'm specifying, right? So that's actually possible in JavaScript using two different types of notations. The first one I'll show you is this. All you have to do is type this little spread operator and then args. And what that will give you, if I log that there, is just simply an array of your arguments. So there, what you can do is, well, if I define a counter and I'm gonna loop over my args, and what I'll do is I'll say every time for each arg I'm gonna add that to my counter and return counter. This way I can keep adding as many numbers as I want to my sum function here, as many arguments, and they're just gonna show up there in my args, which is pretty cool. Another way to do this is to use the arguments keyword. So if I console log the arguments keyword, in every function you're gonna have access to this, and actually that is a slightly different object, as you can see. It's not just an array of the arguments, but it actually contains an iterator object over which you can iterate there. So for that code, I can't use the for each function there on that arguments object, since it's not really an array. So let me just remove this here and this as well. So if I want to get my sum from those arguments, I'm gonna have to write an old school for loop like this. So I'm gonna say I equals 0, I is less than arguments dot length, and I plus plus. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna say for each argument I want to add that to my counter. And there, that's gonna just work as well. Okay, TypeScript is still not happy, But if you're just working with plain JavaScript, this is also fine. Personally, I prefer using that spread operator like this. But as you can see, this arguments object also has some more stuff inside of it, which can be useful in other use cases. I hope you liked this tip today, and I hope you guys learned something. Let us know in the comments if you're liking this tip, or if you have any other tips about JavaScript functions or arrays. See you next Tuesday.